This was written today, Wall Street Journal. The eventual price of crypto's final price could be zero. Senator Warren, I think, thinks that much greater government oversight is necessary.
Early in November, the SEC won a victory against Library, a blockchain company responsible for the LBC token. The next casualty may be Ripple's XRP cryptocurrency. Lyn Alden, who is a key player in the crypto industry, reveals in today's video that this could be the beginning of the end for altcoins. Stay tuned till the end because her revelations are shocking. If you are new here, we are glad to have you. So subscribe and enjoy our content. Thanks.
I think there's going to be more skepticism among VCs and institutions about what they invest in. I also do think there's a higher chance of regulation now coming. Kind of hidden in the week was that the SEC won a court case against the lesser known altcoin, and basically found that they were a security, that they did an ICO and other aspects of the test for what is a security. And that now strengthens the legal precedent that they could use to go after kind of the vast majority of the crypto space out there. I mean, the SEC chairman has said that most assets that trade on these exchanges are probably unregistered securities, right? So this wouldn't include Bitcoin. It probably would not include things like Litecoin and other of these kind of like, say proof of work coins that didn't have like an ICO. But if a token had an ICO, there's a good chance that it's basically a security, and most of them are not registered as such. Some of them are, and so I do think that there will probably be more regulation against the onshore exchanges. Ironically, so this was like an offshore exchange, but I think that it will extend to onshore exchanges, especially because that's what they have more ability to go after. So my base case is that I think that the bubble we saw this time in crypto is probably the biggest bubble we'll see. And I keep joking that it's kind of famous last words, 4 years from now,
Yeah.
bigger bubble. But I actually think the combination of the macro environment, right? So the end of like a 40-year cycle of lower interest rates, all the way to zero, all that COVID stimulus, basically I think, that bubble might be the biggest one. That might be the high watermark for how big the ex Bitcoin, crypto casino part of that industry. I think it'd be pretty hard to rival the size of what it did throughout, say, 2020, 2021.
In March of 2021, the SEC sued Library, alleging it had violated securities laws by selling LBC tokens without registering the agency. Library, which is a file-sharing network based on the blockchain, countered that LBC tokens were not securities and that the SEC did not give it fair notice that its ICO was subject to securities laws, thus violating its right to due process. Apparently, running an initial coin offering, or ICO, is the same as an initial public offering, or IPO, used by companies to issue and sell securities of their company. In the eyes of the law, this seems to be the case. Early in November this year, the court had found Library guilty of selling unregistered securities in the form of its LBC tokens to the public. There is another similar case in court, and that is the case against Ripple Labs, the company responsible for the issuance of the XRP tokens. Ripple Labs has been charged to court for selling tokens worth $1.3 billion in what is now being labeled as unregistered securities. Library has lost its case with the SEC, and FTX has made matters worse for all altcoins. The collapse of FTX would mean swifter policies on cryptocurrencies, and many of these policies may be severe to an extent most altcoins would fail to meet up to the regulations. Library tweeted on their Twitter handle after the case, quote, "We're going to lick our wounds for a little bit, but we're not giving up. We've got a bright team, tens of millions of pieces of content, hundreds of thousands of creators, and one of the most popular Web3 apps in the world. The best is yet to come." End quote. Within a day of the court judgment against Library, the LBC token crashed down to 35%. If Ripple Labs goes down just like Library, the consequence would be a huge blow to cryptocurrencies as a whole, because the XRP token is one of the top cryptocurrencies with one of the highest capitalizations.
SBF was pushing for regulation, to a very extent. He was kind of positioning himself in DC as one of the crypto platforms that was pro-regulation, ironically. It's kind of almost like using regulation as a tool against, other competing firms. And so I think that version's probably not going to continue, but I do think that there's going to be more regulation. And then there is kind of the, politicians can have embarrassment, right? I mean, if you were a politician on stage with this guy or got donations from him, it basically out of like, potentially out of like customer deposits, it doesn't look good, right? So the optics are really bad around that. He was one of the largest donors in the country, political donors. And so I do think that it could be used as an example. Sometimes kind of court precedents or politicians will use a specific thing as
Yeah.
their catalyst to push through legislation. I think that this is one that they're probably going to use.
Before the collapse of FTX, CEO Sam Bankman-Fried was one of the biggest lobbyists for cryptocurrencies, spending millions of dollars on politicians. Would his lobbying count now that the same politicians are moving swiftly to enact law on cryptocurrencies? Lyn Alden does not think so. A regulatory body for overseeing the cryptocurrency market has yet to be determined in the US. The legal status of digital assets is often in limbo as regulators and crypto industries work to create a legislative framework. A recent leaked bill authored by Michigan Democrat Debbie Stabenow and Arkansas Republican John Boozman outlines how the CFTC, the EC's counterpart, should regulate cryptocurrencies.
I think it depends on how well they do it. I mean, they could, actually Michael Saylor gave a good interview on this recently. He described it as they can go in the direction of progressive regulation or regressive regulation. So regressive would basically saying, these are all unregistered securities. You have to go through the full security process. It kind of wipes out most onshore trading. Or they can do the more progressive approach. Say, okay, here's this new policy. This is how you register a token. These are the disclosures you need. And this is how an exchange, registers with both the SEC and, they could have this kind of like clear path of what you're supposed to do. So I think it depends on how much buy-in they can get. I think there is some jurisdictional battling between the CFTC and the SEC on this matter about certain, certain tokens, if they're commodities or securities or not. This also extends over into a spot Bitcoin ETF, even though Bitcoin's not a security. Gensler has, the chairman of the SEC, Gensler has cited a number of times that he's concerned about the exchanges, where the price is determined, and so he basically wants them more regulated before he would allow a spot Bitcoin ETF. And so in general, I think it'll probably focus heavily on these exchanges and the ability, kind of their threshold for what they let on their platform and what the process is.
The world's second largest cryptocurrency may not be safe too. After the collapse of FTX, many crypto enthusiasts made the claim that only Bitcoin and Ethereum would be the cryptocurrencies that would survive the great flush that is about to happen in the crypto market. But it should be recalled that in October, in a symposium hosted by the Rutgers Center for Corporate Law and Governance, one of the biggest issues on the table was the classification of Ethereum in the United States. The most burning issue discussed was the jurisdictional tussle between the CFTC and the SEC. It's a pretty cynical view to say that the two agencies can't manage to find a solution and work together. The CFTC says Ethereum is a commodity, while the chairman of the SEC, Gary Gensler, says it's a security. Whichever way the regulations go, we would be seeing a huge chunk of the market decimated. Thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe so you don't miss our upcoming market analysis.